right, so the first thing we're going to do is go back to something that we looked at the other day in my 1430 folder. I told you guys about this, how I have this web template folder here, right? And so what I'm going to do for today's assignment, or for today's lecture, I'm going to copy that and make a new folder, and I'm going to call it responsive, and then I'm going to edit that one. Okay, so I'm going to open that up in my text editor, open up the CSS, and you saw on my desktop that image of Ozzy. We're going to use that for today, so I'm going to put that in my images folder here real quick. Give me that. There we go. Okay, there we go. So now we got the basic project set up. So inside of this responsive, which is the name of the project for today, I've got my index file, I got my JavaScript folder, which we're not going to worry about today. I got my image folder, and I got my CSS folder, and my CSS is open, my index file is open, ready to go. So first I'm just going to throw together a quick web page. And the web page is just going to have just some basic information about Ozzy, but the goal of today is to look at a site that's going to start breaking as the device gets smaller. And how do we fix that problem? That's the plan, okay? All right. So first off, I'm going to put as an image here, Ozzy.jpg. That's my image, and then I'm going to go ahead and put a navigation menu real quick. So we're actually going to use the nav tag and li, anchor, href. Just going to throw in some fake links here. Okay, and then I'll make 4 links for this particular one. And we have a contact page, contact Ozzy, about Ozzy, and the products page or something like that, okay? Don't forget to close your ULs and your navs. So there's a navigation. This image here, I'm actually going to put it inside of a div that's going to be called main. Okay, and above that, I'm going to put an H1 that just says Ozzy Osbourne. Okay, and then we'll just rip off some text here from Wikipedia. And I'll show you, this is a trick that actually comes in handy in the real world, not just in a class like this. In the real world, oftentimes, I'd say 99.999% of the time, you are not the person that's writing the text on a website, right? Somebody else, they have copywriters and expert writers or whatever that writes the copy for you. So they just give it to you in a Word document or something like that. By the way, hot tip, tell them to give it to you in a plain text file. That'll annoy them, but it'll help you, okay? So anyway, I'm just going to copy this text here as if this is what the copywriters gave to me, right? So I'm going to copy that, and then what you'll have now, you have this big ball of text that you just paste in here. That obviously is not going to work very well, right? We need to put paragraph tags around it. So here's the little trick that you can do. First thing I do is highlight everything and just tab it over to where it lines up where I want it. Next thing I'm going to do is turn off word wrap, which there's a little button, you can see my mouse over right there. I turn off word wrap there, and now each paragraph is just one line there. And so I can very easily do that little multi-line select trick, which in the case of Notepad++ is Shift-Alt-Arrow down, and now I can type that very easily. Now if I turn the word wrap back on, I can very quickly see the closing place where I need to put the closing paragraph. Just dump those right in, and we're done. Okay? Real quick little trick that I use all the time when putting in ad copy. All right? So let's just see how this looks. All right, so here we go. Here's our fabulous site so far. Let's style it up, make it look somewhat decent. So let's go ahead and I'm going to quickly turn our navigation into a decent looking menu. And so remember our trick to make both of these have display, what is it? All right, I'll say it, inline block. I didn't hear anybody saying it. Okay, display inline block. And then we style, all the rest of the style pretty much happens with the anchor tag, right? And so the anchor tag is going to have, we'll put some padding of like 20 pixels. We'll do top 20, or top and bottom 10, and bottom left and right 20. And we'll do a little bit of a margin, 5 pixels. Font, we'll do color black. And we'll do font size, about 25 pixels. And we'll get rid of that underline, text decoration, none. And there we go. I found a really good font on Google Fonts. That when I saw it, I thought, man, that's from the Aussie site for sure. And I typed in the word rock. I was looking for like rock and roll. And right there, man, that's the Aussie font if I ever saw one. So we're going to use that one called New Rocker. I'm just going to grab that link, dump that into my HTML. And then we can access it by using that line right there in our style sheet. And where's my style sheet? There we go. So there, that's the new font that we're going to use for this site, and that's pretty cool for the navigation. I like that. Also, I'm going to make Aussie's H1 there is also going to have that font, so I'm just going to quickly do that, and we'll put that font in there and make the font size something like 60 pixels, and the color will be white because we're about to put a black background on that. All right, so next up we're going to put, for the div, we'll just make the main a couple things. We'll make it margin 20 pixels, auto, background color black, and we'll put some padding on it, about 20 pixels. We'll see how that looks. Okay, and I want the width of it to be about 75% of the width of the parent, like that. And I want the paragraphs, we'll do those up here, to be white. I got a new property I'm going to show you guys in just a second here. And let's make the font family, we'll go to Homa. And font size, about 20, yeah, 20 pixels. All right, we're getting there. Okay, let's talk about this new font property. Let me increase that font size a little bit, maybe 25 pixels. That's better. Okay, so there's a new property here that we haven't talked about. It's called line height. Okay, let me show you what that does. In the paragraph here, line height, and I'm going to put like 5 pixels just to show you what happens. It squishes up all the text, right? Obviously that's no good, but this can be a cool effect if you're doing some sort of weird animation where the text is weird and it grows or whatever. You've seen those little floaty clouds with keywords in them and stuff like that. But the way we're going to fix this to get it to the exact height that I want, that I think is going to look good, so I'm going to right click, go down to inspect, and right here on the line height property, I'll just double click it and I'll use my up arrow until it gets to where I want it to be. And I think that looks pretty good, about 35 pixels, okay? So I'm going to stick with that, 35. And here we go, 35 pixels. The other thing I want to fix is, it looks like there's only 2 paragraphs there. Did I miss something in my code? Yeah, so let's put some space in between those paragraphs to be clear where they are. So how about maybe a margin of top and bottom, like 15, what happened there? 15 pixels, and left and right we'll do it like 5. That's a little better, but man, that's very subtle. See that line break there? That's very subtle. So let's make that a little bit bigger. That looks pretty good. Okay. All right, couple more things we're going to change, and then we'll get going into the real reason we're here today. Let's go ahead and center that Aussie image there. So we'll do display block and margin. We'll give it a margin of like 20 pixels top and bottom and auto. And I also want to center that H1, text align, center. Okay, so what's the difference between text align center and this little centering trick here? Sabbath?
Well, text align is going to be for, I don't know.
Okay, I only called you because I saw your hand up. Sorry, I wasn't trying to pick on you. That's right. Anybody else? So text align will align any, just like it sounds, any text that's inside of an element. Somebody in the previous class made the comparison that it's kind of like clicking the center button when you're in Word, that little center button or the left button or the right button. That's what that basically is. This margin trick here, this actually centers the block, the whole box. It would center the actual paragraph location of the whole paragraph tag, but not necessarily the text inside of it, right? In this case, we're using it to center the image, okay? Does that make sense? So there we go. And now I want to put a margin bottom on that Ozzy Osbourne so it's not quite up against that image. So let's go right here, margin bottom, like 20 pixels. We had this exact same problem in the last class, and I'm still not sure what's causing. So in the last class, we had the same thing happen. And I'm not sure why it's doing this, but for some reason that H2 margin, or that H1 margin is not working. So what do we do when we have a problem like that? Put a border on it, right? So I did that. This is exactly what I did in the last class, 2 pixels solid red. Put a border on it, and there you can see it. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to put a border on the box, the main div here, to see if I can see what's going on there, so I can see if there's any relationship to why that H1 isn't working right. So I put a border, 2 pixels solid blue. Oh, and this time it didn't do what it did. In the other class, the border, the margin started working on the H1 when I put a border on it. We never figured out why. So I'm going to see if I can push that down here. Margin bottom on the H1 right here. All right, it's working fine. I just didn't see it. It wasn't big enough. Okay. Yeah, we had a different problem in the other class. So I guess we did not have that same problem here. So I'm going to go with 80. That looks pretty good to me. So put that margin, where is it? Right there. 80. Get rid of that border. Get rid of that blue border. That's pretty good. All right, we feeling okay about that? All right, last thing, I want to center that menu. So I'm just going to do that with nav ul and text align center, and I want to make that font size a little bit bigger. There we go. There's our site. I think that looks pretty good. Okay. All right. So that's what it looks like full screen. Now, before we go into the reason we're here today, I want to make sure, other than line height, that was a new property we talked about today, everything I just did at a pretty fast pace, you should have been able to do on your own. Do you guys agree with that? Do you feel pretty good about that? That you know everything I did wasn't anything new or weird. It's just pretty much straight CSS. And I purposely chose to do some where I did it on blocks like this, and other ones where I did it the full, just a line like this, because they all work just fine, okay? This HTML is pretty straightforward, right? This HTML could have been a 5-minute website, right? It's pretty simple, okay?
Importing that new font was new to me.
We did that on the Getting Fancy with CSS lecture. Were you here that day?
I don't know.
I don't think you've ever missed.
Missed one day.
Did you? Okay, that might have been the day you missed, yeah. So there is a recording of that lecture too. There's a lot of cool things we did that day. Some cool animation stuff. But other than that, yeah, this is stuff that you guys should be pretty comfortable with. And I would hope that you could do exactly this same style here if I said, hey, go do it right now, right? And you may not do it in like 5 or 10 minutes or whatever, but maybe within an hour you'd have this all done. I would like to think that. So I feel that's where you guys should be. Okay, so now that we have it though, let's play around with this and see what's going to happen. I'm going to close some of this extra stuff that's bugging me, these other tabs here. Okay, the idea of responsive web design is every single device will it'll look different on every device. Okay, and we want to see how it's going to look on each device. So one way that I do this often is I will just take the browser window and I'll start dragging the window and watching the page and see if anything starts to look a little wonky, right? That's a technical term, okay? And soon as something weird happens, and we're gonna do some stuff here in a minute, but I'm gonna show you what I mean by weird. Like right here, look at that image. See, that looks weird for sure, right? And also look at the home, contact, about. That menu's getting a little bit too big for its britches right there, right? Okay. So that's a place where I'd want to make some changes. We're going to make some changes earlier on than that. But as I discovered in my last class, one of the tools I use all the time in my browser no longer works. There's a tool that's called Ruler. It's a plugin for developers. And I guess it now violates the Chrome store rules of ethics or whatever. And so I can't use that tool anymore. What it did, though, is it would tell me how wide my window is right now. Well, I can't use that anymore. That's very useful information to know if you're going to be doing responsive web design. And so we're going to have to do some guesstimating here, okay? And I'll show you how we get around that. But before, what I would do is I'd come along here and I'd say, oh, right there, I don't like the way that looks. I want to change it right here. And I would look at that ruler and it would tell me how wide the window is. And I'd go in and write code that says, hey, when the window's this wide, run this CSS, okay? Well, now I have to guess where that point is. Yeah?
In the inspect in Chrome, you can change it.
Yeah, but that's not going to help with what I'm talking about. We're going to look at that tool. Yes, but it doesn't tell me how wide my window is right now, right? Yeah, we are going to look at that tool in a second. Okay, so since you brought it up, I'll show you what he's talking about. So if you right-click and you go into inspect here, there's this little button right here. I'm assuming that's what you're talking about, right? Yeah. This button right here, when I click on this, this tells me, let me shrink this up a little bit. This shows me what it will look like on, in this particular case, an iPad Pro, okay? I can choose to see what it looks like on a Galaxy S5. I can choose to show what it looks like on an iPhone 10, 6, 7, 8 Plus. And I can also show what it looks like in landscape view, right? And I can scroll it by clicking on it, okay? So this is what it looks like. And by the way, you might be saying this looks okay on all those devices. Yeah, it does. However, I still test by resizing the browser because, as you saw, that image got weird looking and it's not showing up as a problem here, but it actually would be a problem. So that, I think there may be something wrong with the Chrome emulator here. So, but you can choose different the more popular current devices right here, right? But the problem is that does not tell me how wide my browser window is right now, right? Like this is 1,500 pixels wide or whatever. I don't have the ability to see that. So I'm gonna turn that off. There's another plugin you can use, which is pretty cool. And it's one I use all the time, but I tried it in last class and it didn't work. It's called Emmet. It's right here. And when I click on it, it used to, maybe I'm just remembering wrong how to use it, but it used to allow me the ability to do sort of what this little thing here does. And so I'm not sure what's going on with this Emmet plugin either. So all the tools that I normally use are out the window. We don't have the ruler. We're just going to have to guesstimate. So let me show you how we write the code that says, hey, when you're this wide, do this. Okay? Those are called media queries. So here's what we're going to do. At the very bottom here, I like to put in my media queries at the bottom. It doesn't matter. You can put them wherever you want. You start off with @media, and then in parentheses, you put max width, and then whatever the width is of the window where you want to make the change happen, right? I'm gonna go with like 1500 for the moment, and then I'll tweak it if that's not quite right. And then whatever code I put in those curly braces, that code is what will run when we get to 1500 pixels, okay? So let's make sure we understand what's happening here. We're saying that I want to run this code on line 39 and below when I get to a maximum width of 1500. So basically 1500 and below, this is what code I'll use. If I'm at 1501, I won't use this code anymore, okay? So I'm gonna quickly put just a dumb thing in here, div.main, background, color, red. Just so I can see if I've got the right pixel, 1500, right? Okay, so that looks pretty good. So I'm gonna stretch it right there. So my guess was pretty darn accurate. I guessed 1500 pixels. So I want, right about here is where I do want this break to happen, right there at 1500 pixels. And what do I want to change? At 1500 pixels, I don't want to make it red. I just did that to see if I knew where I was at. I want this black background, oops, to no longer be 75% of the window. I want it to be a little bit more percentage of the window, okay? So what I'm going to put here is div.main width is 95%. That's just a design choice I'm making. There's no rules here, right? This is just what I think will look nice. And frankly, what I think will look nice probably isn't what the nicest looking thing. And you guys probably have a better eye for that kind of stuff than I do, right? That's just not my forte. Pardon me. That's not my fort. That is a proper pronunciation of that word. Okay. So now when I it starts off this big and I start shrinking it up, and right about when I think, in fact, I was just about to say it, right about when I'm feeling, man, that black's getting a little too narrow, right then it changed, because I put my media query at that point. So to me, that looks better there, okay? All right, so far so good. So we just made a simple media query, and we're saying at 1500 pixels, do this, and I can put whatever code I want in here. I can put any CSS I want in here, and it will override anything in the up above it, okay? Questions so far? We good? All right. Yeah?
So you don't have to go through and change everything. It just runs the same, and when it hits that 15 pixels, it
Changes whatever.
the things that you clarified.
Yes, yeah. So the question was, do I have to redo all this code in here, basically, right? And the answer is no. The only thing that all this does when I get to this point at 1500 pixels wide, it says, okay, do what you normally would do, except, oh, here's one change we need to make. So let's just override what the current width of the main is, which is right here. So it's literally just overriding that one property. That's it. Nothing else. Yeah. All right, so now let's shrink it up a little bit more. And now notice this font here, the jagged edges here. That looks okay, but you can actually do a different kind of text alignment, which is called justify. And so I think that I'm going to, at this point, that same 1500 breakpoint, I'm going to set my text up to be text align. Instead of align center or left or right, we're going to do justify. Okay? And now when I get to that breakpoint, now you can see that it lines up perfectly. See that? Everybody see what I did there, the difference? Okay, and then again, if you've written a Word document, that's an option to just click the little justify button, right? So this looks pretty good. All right, so now I'll shrink it up a little bit more. And by the way, as I'm shrinking it up, if you see something that you think you would change, stop me, and we'll play around with it, okay? So is there anything that you guys like the way it looks okay right now? You feel all right? Okay? Yeah,
I just have a question.
Sure.
Do you have to use JavaScript to do one of the little hamburger menus, or can you do that with CSS?
no, you can do that with CSS, yeah. So you're talking about, let me pull up a site here. I know exactly what you're talking about. Well, I didn't make it into a hamburger, but yeah, you can. Sankey talks right here. So this particular site, this won't go into a hamburger, but I know what you mean. So if I resize this and it gets smaller, that stuff right there becomes the word menu right there. But with the hamburger, what he's talking about, in case you guys aren't familiar, Can you think of a site that has one on it?
No, I was just looking at W3 schools, but I don't know any other one.
W3 School has a hamburger?
They have an example, but it was
Oh.
in Java.
Yeah, I wonder if the website itself actually, when it shrinks up small, yeah, that's a hamburger right there, okay? So that little menu there. So now the menu is there instead of being like this, okay? So that little thing they call the hamburger because it looks like a bun and a piece of meat in between it or whatever, okay? So I could just as easily made this site, instead of the word menu appear, a little hamburger. And what you would do is, right now, that menu is just in a div that just appears and is hidden when I'm bigger, when it's wider. Instead of that, you can actually use a div that you've styled up to with padding and thickness and stuff to look like the hamburger. That's a way to do it in CSS. You can also use images, which I don't recommend doing that. You can also use SVG images, which are tricky, and we won't be getting into in this semester, but if you want to look those up, you can do that. There's also websites out there where you can basically make your own font, and that's a pretty common thing people do these days. In fact, let me show you a site. It's called Shop Talk, Chris Coyer, I think. Yeah, Shop Talk Show. So he has, let me see here if I can find. This is the guy that creates CSS tricks. Let me look on that site. I think there's some on there. What's going on here? This server's down. Oh man, Chris, bad. That's no good, man. He's one of the biggest CSS sites on the internet when his site goes down. He's the guy who created CodePen. I'm not sure what's going on with his site, so I can't show you. But he has on his site a whole bunch of these little teeny symbol-looking things, and they're all just a font that he made on one of these sites. And so you can make a font that looks like a hamburger, and then just use it. And so, in other words, you want your letter A in that font. It doesn't look like an A, it looks like a hamburger, right? And so you just type the letter A right there, and it'll look like the little hamburger menu. So there's a lot of different ways you can do that without JavaScript. Anything that deals with layout and style, almost everything, you can do it with CSS. Used to, you needed JavaScript for all that stuff. But nowadays with CSS, you can do it pretty much without it. Okay, so let's get back to the position we were at here. And I think we were right around here somewhere. And again, holler if you see anything that you want to change.
The size of the image.
Okay, so you want to shrink the image down?
Yeah.
Okay. Also, I'm looking at the text down here. It's getting a little weird looking. So the image, we're gonna mess with the image in a second. I want to not do it here because I want to do it. Oh, you can't. It's not even doing it now. It was sticking out a minute ago. Now it's not. Okay, so let's do that right about here. You said.
Yeah.
Actually, let's do it right here because that's also where the menu breaks. Right? See that where the menu broke there? So that's another break point. I'm going to guess that's about 900. So let's see if I'm right about that. So we just put another media query in. At media, max width, 900 pixels. And I'm going to do the same trick I did a minute ago just to see if I'm at the right place. Background color, red. Okay. So that looks about right. Let's see. Now my guess again, pretty accurate. Okay. So I'm going to change a couple things at the 900 breakpoint. Thing number one, that little teeny thin margin there, that yellow, I think we can get rid of that now. Just make that full 100% width. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and we'll go width. Width is 100%. Oh, it must not be at the breakpoint yet. There it is, right there, okay? Oh, look at my paragraphs here. This is interesting. That's weird. That should not be happening. Oh, and the reason it's happening, because I forgot to tell you guys something. There's one other piece of code we got to put in our HTML. I forgot about that. I forgot to mention it. And I always have to steal it from my own site because I can never remember it. So I'll put it in there, then I'll explain it to you. Okay, so right here in my HTML, this meta tag, okay? So what this is saying here, the content, when we talk about width, we're talking about the device width. And we're saying the initial scale is equal to 100%. The minimum scale is 100%. So what that means, the initial scale, when you open it up on your phone, what you see is 100% size, right? And then what the minimum scale means that it can't get smaller than 100%, which means no pinching and zooming, right? Which is what this other piece comes in here, user scalable equals no. That prevents the user from being able to resize stuff by pinching and zooming, okay? So now I should be able to, if I refresh this, still didn't solve that problem. Did I save it? I did. Okay, folks, what's going on? What do we do? Put a border on it. And it looks like there's a blue border. Oh, that border's still on there. Well, there's one easy way to deal with this. Okay, and this is the kind of stuff that you'll have to tweak, so I'm glad this one came up. This didn't happen in the last class. I'm not sure why. But right here, see that little blue right there is bugging me. I'm not sure what that is. But right here, those paragraphs they're now bigger than their parent. So I'm going to fix that by not even in my media query. I'm just going to say that the maximum width of a paragraph is 100%. That means it can only be, it cannot be bigger than its parent. Okay, so let's see if that solved it. If not, there's another thing we're going to deal with. Yeah. So the other thing that's happening here is, well, let me see if anybody can guess. Okay, by looking at this right here, any thoughts on why that's still getting bigger than its parent?
Is the margin pushing it higher than the other?
Yes, very good. It's because it's a box sizing problem, right? And so it's 100% plus 25 margin or 5 pixel margin on either side, right? So we solve that by doing box sizing border box. And I'm hoping that's going to solve the problem here. And of course it did not. This is going to bug me, folks. Now we got to figure this out. Okay, let's go back to my mantra. Put a border on it. Okay, there's the paragraph. Let's put a border on the main. Bless you. Okay, there's a bright yellow border, kind of hard to see, but there it is. Okay, so let's get here. And right when we hit that break point, there, right there. Okay, so what? That break point, let's take a look here. And my guess is that image is getting to us. That image, I think, is as wide as the screen is right there. I think that's what's going on. So the image is actually pushing things wonky. I think that's what's happening. So let's try tweaking the image. I'm going to put on here that the maximum width of the image is 100% also. And that looks like it fixed the problem. Yeah. Nope, did not. Still. Boy, that's annoying, man. Okay. Something like this.
It's your menu.
Yeah. Oh, well, but see what's happening here. This paragraph should be resizing, should be shrinking up with and fitting in there. And somehow oh, I know why. Because my main is also needing to be box sizing border box. I think that should solve it. There we go. It was having the same exact problem, right? It was 100% plus the margins. Yeah, I should have seen that sooner than I did. But it's good. I want you guys to experience troubleshooting a little bit, so it's good little exercise. Okay, does everybody understand what we just dealt with there, what the problem was? You feeling okay? Okay, any questions about that? Okay, so just to, again, to clarify, the black div here, down in my media query, before my media query, it was only taking up 75% of the width of the screen. Once I got to this media query, it was taking up 100% width. Well, it was taking up 100% width, plus it was taking up 20 pixels of padding on the left and right, and that's all, I guess. There's no, and then a border, which I added on there. But it was taking up this extra padding. So it was really 100% plus 40 pixels. When I made a box sizing border box, that's the little trick to get rid of that problem, okay? So now I can take the border off all this stuff, get rid of the border on the paragraph, right here. And there we go. All right, and the image, we've taken care of that. So we wanted to deal with this font, or this menu problem here. So any suggestions on what to do with the menu at this point? We're going to put it in the same breakpoint here. What do you think we should do with the menu?
Make it smaller.
Okay, maybe the font smaller. Okay, that's one way to do it for sure. The other thing I think is that so the font definitely needs to get smaller. I also think that these gaps in here may be a little bit too big. So let's start off by shrinking up the font. Nav, UL, LI, anchor, and we'll say font size is 35 pixels. That looks pretty good, actually. The only other thing, though, is it looks off-center now for some reason, because when it was a bigger font, it didn't look as bad. So I want to get rid of that gap at the bottom of the menu. The easiest way to figure out where that gap is coming from, put a border on it. So putting that on the UL right there. So where's the gap coming from? One of two places by looking at that picture right there.
Margin on the UL.
Margin on the UL, bottom margin on the UL, or
Margin on the main.
top margin on the main, yep, okay? Or both, right? So I'm actually gonna remove that bottom margin at the root level, not in the media query, because I don't want it there at all. So I'm gonna go with margin bottom 0. That did not fix it. Oh, did I put that in the right place?
0 pixel.
No, we don't need to do that. That didn't fix it, so let's try in here, changing that to 0. There we go. So it was the top margin of the main, okay? So we don't need this line here. That was not the problem. There we go. That looks pretty good, okay? Now I'm wondering about this font here, though. It's looking a little bit weird. I can't put my finger on exactly what I don't like about it, but any thoughts on that? What do you guys think? Too big, too small, too many gaps, not enough gaps, good line height, bad line height, what? Say, no, the paragraph, sorry. Yeah.
I think both the line height and the size of the font.
Is too big, too small?
Too big.
Too big, okay. So let's shrink it up a little bit. Let's go paragraphs, and we'll say font size, I think it was 25 originally. Where's my font? There, 25, yeah. So let's change it to 20 pixels. That's going to affect the line height. See how the line height looks worse now? So we'll shrink the line height up a little bit to like 30 pixels. See how that looks. What do you guys think? Yay or nay? Okay. Yeah, and that's the other thing too. It's all design choice that you make. Good rule of thumb though, for every hour of HTML, 10 hours of CSS. I'm not kidding. You think I am, but I'm not kidding. Because it's the kind of thing like right now, we could spend an hour tweaking this stupid text right here, right? And that'll happen. And sometimes you have to do it, other times. Because what'll end up happening right now, because it's fully justified, it's got nice smooth ends on the left and right here. What'll happen sometimes, you get really big gaps in between the letters, and it doesn't look as clean. And so maybe I'll say, well, let's try going back to text align left, and see if that looks better. And then I have to debate and go ask my wife, what do you think? Does it look better that way, or does it look better with the line, right? Or ask a coworker or whatever, and just try to figure out which way looks better. And you play around and you tweak, and you play around and you tweak, right? So we're gonna leave it here the way it is. Now let's go ahead and shrink this up a little bit more. And somebody, I think, Ken, were you the one that mentioned that the image is getting a little too big?
Yeah.
Okay, I agree with you. So I'm gonna do the next break right there where the menu breaks again. And now we're gonna tweak that image and the menu. So that break point, I'm gonna guess, is about 700. So let's see, media, max width, 700 pixels. And I'm gonna say, I'm gonna do my same trick. Normally I would not do this trick here where I set the background color to red. The only reason I'm doing that is just to see if I'm even in the right pixel width, you know. Normally I would use that ruler or something. Yeah, okay, so that's pretty good. So let's see how close I was this time. No, I was off. Yeah, man, my guesses are pretty accurate. Okay, so 700 looks good. Okay, so now notice something here. Now that that background's red, we can see the real distance between the image and the text there, Ozzy Osbourne in the picture, because when it was black before, the image kind of blended in, right? But now we get a better sense of how far apart that is, and maybe that alone, just scooting the image up a little bit, would help clear things up a little. So I'm gonna leave it red for a minute, and I'm gonna say that I want the H1 to have a margin bottom of 35 pixels instead of whatever, like that. I think that looks a little bit better. And let's go ahead and shrink that image up, make its height a little bit less. So we'll say the image height, we'll go max height, is 300 pixels, I think, if I remember right what I wanted to change it to. There we go. Changes that up a little bit, okay? That'll look better when we put the black background back on it. But now notice, though, the paragraph text moved up a little bit. We moved it up quite a bit by changing the bottom margin of Aussie and changing the size of that picture, right? So if I get rid of this business here, that looks pretty good. And that image looks like it's taking up the whole width there still because it blends in with that black. So let's deal with that menu, okay? The menu, nav, anchor. And for that, I'm going to decrease I'm going to get rid of the margin in between everything. Oh, that fixed everything, man. That looks pretty good. Okay. Got lucky on that one. All right. So let's go ahead and shrink it up a little bit more. And man, that menu broke again, right? Just 2 seconds later. So that tells me that my solution here for 700 is not good enough, because there's no reason to have a breakpoint at 700, then another one at 650, and then another one at 625, right? Let's just see if we can make the breakpoint at 700 work all the way down to, like 500 or something. So I'm going to go ahead and shrink that text up a little bit more. Font size, we'll go down to 25 pixels. And the padding left will go to 5 pixels. And the padding right, we'll do 5 pixels. There we go, okay? And that's gonna stay pretty good the whole time, right? And that gets us pretty much, now notice right there, a new breakpoint, that changed. Now we might say that looks pretty cool and leave it that way. Maybe we like that, maybe not. Okay, let's just say we don't like it. And that'll be our last breakpoint, so I'm gonna guess that's about 450. Media max width 450 pixels. And we want the H1 font size to be, I think it's, what did I make it, 60 or 55 originally? 60. So let's do like 40 pixels. Didn't quite get it there. I don't know if I got the wrong breakpoint or not. So let's do our little favorite trick here. Div.main, background color red. Oh, so 450 is not quite the right number. Maybe 550. That time I was way off, apparently. Man, I'm not even close. 650? Oh, no, that's not. I had the right. I did have the right number. Put a semicolon there when I shouldn't have. There we go. So my guess was good. Sorry. Yeah, right there it looks good, and then right there it shrinks up a little bit. Okay. So let's get rid of this background red. Actually, I'm going to leave that on for just a second. I'm going to show you a trick that's a bad idea, but it's fun. And if you have a small enough website, it's safe. Okay. Here we go. On the star up here that's targeting everything, I'm going to put a transition. Remember that from the other day? Transition all at 500 milliseconds. Anybody have any sense of what that's going to do?
When things shrink, they'll like explode.
Yeah, it'll look really cool, right? So now let's go. I'm going to full size it here, then refresh. Now watch what happens as we shrink. Instead of it flickering, do you see how it slowly shrinks? Okay, let's keep going. Again, it's a slow effect. Then you'll watch the image and you see how that font shrank like that, right? Watch when it turns red. Fades red, right? Kind of cool. I would not leave it turning red, but I just wanted to show you that effect. Okay. Now, here's the thing. The reason why that's kind of a waste of resource, it does take up processor power. And if you have somebody on a bad computer, a bad internet connection, or a bad browser, or whatever, that could be an issue. But thing number two, it's not like people look at your website and they resize it, right? They look at it on their size, whatever it is. And so the only time they would ever see those effects is if they're on a mobile device and they rotate it, right? So if they rotate it from landscape to portrait or whatever, then they would see that transition, which is a cool thing to see if they're doing that. So maybe you'd want to do that in your media queries only. Put a transition inside your media queries or something like that, okay? But this, to me, I think we're done for this. This looks pretty good. I mean, we can question whether or not yellow was the right choice for the background. But imagine this is a mobile device, and so it would look, it would look more like, come on, give me my phone here. It would look more like something like this, right? That's a pretty small phone. And that they would see that, and they would scroll up, and then, flicking with their thumb and scrolling up and read that, okay? Looks pretty good. So we're going to talk about one other piece of that. Oh, did you see that? That's pretty cool. Watch, see this? So we're going to talk about one other thing that relates to this, but I want to make sure conceptually you guys understood everything we just did. We feeling okay about that? Are there any questions about the media queries? Yeah?
Could you use a media query to identify the rotation?
To say that one more time?
Like, would there be a way for the website to recognize when the phone's being rotated? And then
There is a way, and I never use this, so I'd have to look up the syntax, but you can put in your media query, whether it's landscape or portrait, you can actually put that in the media query. But I'd have to look that one up to remember how to do it, because I never prefer to do that. So are you thinking you want,
like if you wanted,
you want to know the moment they rotate, or you just want to know that it has been rotated?
if you wanted to introduce the transition only when the device is being rotated.
Yeah, the way you would probably do that, I'd have to think about that, but probably the way you do that is in your media query, you do the little thing that I'm talking about that I don't remember, where you put portrait or landscape, and you would specifically say just on portrait or just on landscape, you put the transition in there, and so that way only when it's specifically noticing the mode it's in. But I'd have to experiment. That's a good question. That's kind of a fun one to think about. So I'm not sure. Now the other thing too. Once you get to a certain screen size, they're probably on a mobile device, right? It's not like laptops are, 500 pixels wide or whatever. And so once you get to a certain size, you just throw the transition on there. They won't see the transition unless they rotate anyway, because once it's on your tablet, you can't pinch and zoom it. It's always that size. And so when you rotate the tablet, then you would see the transition happen. So that's probably the way I would do it, is that what I just said. Because once you're at a certain size, you're probably not on a laptop anymore, yeah. So that's probably how I do it. Other questions? Okay, so now there's this concept in web design called mobile first design. What we just did is called desktop first design, okay? Mobile first design is exactly the opposite of what we just did. What we started off with is what we thought would look good on a desktop, right? Which again, that's arguable, but that was just me throwing something together in 5 minutes. But we thought this is what it looks great on the website. It's this nice wide display where the black background takes up most of the screen. And we said that looks good on a desktop. Well, now let's start scaling it down and trying to make it work on other devices, right? Mobile first is the opposite. You have your designer, your Photoshop person, or you if you're that person, design what the phone's gonna look like. When I pick up my phone and I open it up and I look at it, what is it gonna look like on my phone? You have them design that, and you start there. And then, once it's designed perfectly and you've got it perfectly laid out for the phone, then you make media queries the other way, okay? And the way you do that is by using min width instead of max width in your media query, right? So instead of a max width, you do a min width. And again, remember, in this scenario, what max width means is that at 450 and smaller, do this code, right? A min width means at 450 and bigger, do this code, okay? So let's talk about the difference briefly, why that matters. Well, when I built this web page, I spent all my time, quote unquote, making it look good in quotes also, for the desktop, right? That's where I spent all my design time. I spent all the time tweaking it, perfecting it, and you know, I spent hours and hours and hours doing that, right? And then what I did for the mobile device was just say, all right, let's just make it to where it doesn't look like crap as it gets smaller, right? That's basically what we did. And we're happy with how it looked when it got smaller. Well, if we were worried about the mobile experience, we might start off with the hamburger menu, like you were asking about, right? We might start off with a hamburger menu. We might start off with really cool design elements that are just unique, that look good on a phone, and spend all of our time there. And then as it grows bigger, try not to make it look like crap when it grows bigger. And that is the trend these days, is mobile first, okay? Now, in my scenario, my particular websites that I use, my users, I looked at Google Analytics, my users are 90 or 80 something percent desktops, or not mobile. So I don't care about the mobile experience as much. Now, mine looks good on mobile. My magicreview.com looks good on mobile, and the Sankey Talks look good on mobile, and my Stone Cold Magic Magazine and Stone Cold Magic, all those look great on mobile. But I didn't design them for mobile first. I designed them for desktop first, okay? All right, any questions about that? I just want to check my notes here real quick, make sure I didn't miss anything. And while we're thinking about it, while I'm doing that, what do you guys think? How are we feeling? Good? Yeah. One last thing I just want to briefly mention. So your final project, remember your final project, let me show you, Stone Cold Professor. Remember this page that you guys made? Bless you. That said, someday this will be full of links. This is your final project. This is not your midterm, it's your final project. And so you guys should be building on this as we go. What should be on here is every project you've done so far, you should be a link from here to that project. If it's not there now, it's okay. But by the end of the semester, that needs to be the case. And so if I come to your home page, theoretically right now, it's gonna say, here's a link to my YouTube assignment, my tables assignment, or whatever, my little boxes assignment, in a couple weeks, my link to my midterm assignment, so on and so forth. And eventually this page is gonna look awesome, right? It's gonna be your fabulous final project, and it needs to be mobile ready. It needs to be responsive. Now you can design it mobile first or desktop first, I don't care. But when I resize my browser, it needs to resize and properly adjust. Well, there's a really cool thing out there called Bootstrap, okay? Who's heard of Bootstrap before? Okay, Bootstrap was created by the folks at Twitter. And Salt Lake Community College actually uses Bootstrap. And if you look in here, Bootstrap, there you go. You can see that they're importing the Bootstrap style sheet. okay? So the question is, what the heck's Bootstrap? What is Bootstrap? It's literally a style sheet. That's it. It's just a style sheet that a whole bunch of other people built at Twitter, and they've given it to the world for free, okay? It's a style sheet, and if we go click on this, now notice there's no layout here, okay? But this is a humongous style sheet. But it's just that. It's just a style sheet. Nothing more, okay? It's humongous, right? And it's also been what's called minified. Minifying is a little process you can run on your code, or on your CSS or whatever, which will get all the spaces out. So it's just one line of code, basically, which makes it load faster in the browser. Now, there's some selectors in here you guys have never seen before. This little angle bracket, we're going to look at some of these next week. The plus and some of these other things, okay? But there's some stuff in here with transition and easing, right? There's some transform right there, translate, a whole bunch of other things. Okay, here's some media queries. I just saw the word media right there. Okay, so why is Bootstrap important? Okay, personally, I don't use Bootstrap. For the main reason, look how big that style sheet is. Most of the effects that Bootstrap will do for me, I would rather write it myself. However, one thing that's really cool about Bootstrap is the guys who created it, they understand layout. They understand what looks good, okay? And so when we're looking at the Slick site right here, let me get back to normal size. As I scroll through this is called a parallax effect, actually that's not a parallax effect, sorry. But this scrolling where you have a background image that's sort of stationary and you got other things happening on top of it, this is just a Bootstrap theme. And by Bootstrap theme, all I mean by that is I looked in the Bootstrap CSS file and I looked at all the classes that I liked and I applied them to my HTML. And behold, I get this, right? That's all it is. So when you first learned HTML, what did you have to do? You had to go to W3 Schools, learn all the tags, right? When you first learned CSS, what did you have to do? Go to W3 Schools and CSS Tricks and learn all the properties and selectors and values, right? Well, what do you do when you learn Bootstrap? You go into their CSS file, which is free, and we'll learn how to do it later. But you go into their CSS file and you learn all their classes that they created and all their different class names that you can just put those classes in your HTML, and poof, you're now applying their style sheet to your code. Okay, that's what Bootstrap basically is. It's very cool, and it's very useful, and I've been tempted to use it a couple of times because they know layout. I don't know layout. They know layout, and they've made some nice looking sites. Okay, all right, any questions about anything we covered today, guys? Okay, this is the last day of Intro to CSS. All the advanced stuff comes next week. This coming Thursday is review for the midterm. See you guys in a couple days.